Shalom, brother and sister truth seekers. I wanted to try and do a quick video that had some notes and some tips for the straight line method for people who might be preparing to try and confirm an equinox event. I have put it in a bullet point presentation just in case people wanted to look at a checklist of things to consider. I'm going to try and present this. I apologize for the format, but this is what I got to work with right now. So I guess I wanted to include the text in case people wanted to, I don't know, take a screen capture and like actually check things off or however they want to do it. But, or maybe if maybe there's some deaf people need this to read. So anyway, I'm just going to talk through this. I might not read every word, but I'll try and touch on the high points here, and I hope this helps if you're looking at trying to confirm an equinox event. So, the so-called equinox event. Equinox is Latin for equal night, and the sun will be traveling across the center line of heaven, which modern science calls the celestial equator. For reference, if you want to look at the night sky and understand where the celestial equator is, it's right next to Orion's belt, or slightly above it. So just watch the path of Orion's belt in the night sky, and this will show you the approximate location of Orion, of the celestial equator. So you just kind of you'd have to watch Orion all night in case you didn't realize this, but the stars are spinning slowly, so if you ever went out at one time of night and then you went out like 5 hours later, you would notice that Orion was in a different place as he kind of coasts across the sky. So just follow his belt, and that'll give you an idea of approximately where the celestial equator is. So anyway, the equinox event is a unique event that I'm not sure modern science is properly understanding. Modern science claims that the sun will cross over the celestial equator in a moment of time. However, after collecting years of sundial data, it seems the reality is that the sun actually rides on the celestial equator for an entire day, 2 different times of the year, once for the winter to spring transition and once for the summer to fall transition. So, if we think back to high school education, middle school education, you'll remember, or just logic, we get hot and cold seasons depending on how close the sun is to our location on Earth. In cold and winter seasons, the sun will be far or low on the horizon, and in the summer or the hot seasons, the sun will be close or high in the sky. And as the sun makes its seasonal north-south shifting over the course of the year, it follows 3 different tracks in the heavens, similar to the tracks on a DVD or an old music record. These tracks are mapped out in the heavens generally as 3 different patterns as apparently seen from Earth. 1 circular track north of the equator, a straight line at the celestial equator, and an opposite circular track south of the celestial equator. I should have said celestial there. See the image below. These are called star trails. What this is someone had a special camera where it was taking a picture like every 5 minutes. So as I mentioned, if you went out 5 hours later in the middle of the night, you would see things moved. So this picture is generated just a whole bunch of pictures taken like one every 5 minutes, and then it's all put together, and it shows you the path that the stars are tracing in the night sky. And let's see. One thing to note about this picture is these different patterns you see. You can see a circle on one side clearly, and then you see that straight line down the middle. And if you look on the left side, you can see an opposite facing circle just outside of the picture there. But depending on where you live on Earth, if you're far north or south of the equator, you actually won't see all 3 of these patterns. You might only see 1 circle. This picture is a special picture because it was taken near the equator, so you can see all three. And this is something you can confirm if you've ever checked out like star software like Stellarium. If you set your location for somewhere near the equator and then you look straight up in the sky and you turn the stars on fast, spinning fast, you'll be able to see these three patterns. But anyway, so the sun is generally following these three different star trail patterns, or tracks, as it slowly progresses a little closer to or farther away from the celestial equator each day, depending on what time of year it is. And the sun casts a shadow pattern down on Earth, which mirrors the tracks of the heavens. So see the image below. That's kind of a stick coming out of a board, some kind of sundial, and as the sun moves through the heavens, it's casting a shadow off the tip of that stick, or maybe there's a hole in this particular picture, and it traces these patterns. You see the same patterns. The sun is following those star trail patterns, and we can see that if we just measure it on a board or a flat surface. So the sun is casting a shadow down on the earth. It mirrors the tracks of heaven. And yeah, we can confirm that with any object that casts a good shadow, like a point. You need to track a point, so the very tip of a shadow, over the course of a day and then over the course of a year. And you'll see these different patterns on this board down here occurring. So again, the day of equal light and darkness as seen from the equator, which is the equinox event, not to be confused with the equilux event, the sun will be cutting that perfectly straight line across the center line of heaven, following or riding the celestial equator. And the cool thing is, it seems all locations on Earth will be able to see this straight line pattern generated on the ground over the course of a single day. All locations north and south of the equator should see it within the same 24-hour window. And it can be measured and confirmed with sundials. So here we go. Here are some tips for, and maybe I'll leave that open for now, for measuring and confirming the straight line sundial shadow phenomenon. So as you can see from the picture above, there is a straight line, blue line running up the middle, and if you follow the blue line back through that sundial, you'll see the word equinox there, and then you follow the red line and the dark blue line, and it shows you these different curves that are progressing away from the that middle line, the straight line. So that's generally what's going to happen as the sun is shifting slightly north and south each day over the course of a year. Those curved patterns are going to be moving a little closer and a little farther away, depending on to the straight line, depending on what time of year it is. Kind of like the tracks of a record is just going to be hopping from one line to the next as it gets closer and closer to the center line of heaven. So here are some tips. Okay, as previously mentioned, to measure the straight line, you will need some object that casts a nice shadow point. This could be the tip of a 3-inch tall nail or screw coming up out of a flat board or table, or it could be something taller like a fence post, flagpole, etc. For taller sundials like these, you will want to make sure you have flat ground. It doesn't need to be perfectly level, but it does need to be flat. So here are some specific tips for the short sundial, such as an inverted nail or screw sticking out of a board. Make sure your board or table or recording surface is flat. It does not need to be perfectly level, but make sure I suppose it helps to be reasonably close to level, but you don't have to kill yourself if you're not good with construction tools or level or whatnot. It can be slightly out of level. It's not going to hurt anything. But it does need to be flat, so you'll want to make sure you don't have like a piece of cardboard with bumps in it or some wavy paper that got crinkled and has high points and low points. Like, you need to make sure your recording surface is flat. So make sure to use a fine tip pencil or sharp tiny pins, etc. The point being, you need to accurately be able to mark the tip of the object casting the shadow as accurately as possible. big marker points are not recommended unless you have close to 11 to 12 hour spread of data points that you're able to collect over the course of the day, like something from like 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Like if you're not able to get that much data, it can get tricky. It can look like the line is potentially straight when it's not, and having bulky marker points doesn't help. So it's in your best interest to try and define the tip of that shadow as accurately as possible. I typically use a sharp pencil, and I carefully try to, I meant to say trace the outline of the shadow cast by the tip of my nail. So I end up with a little caret that defines the point where the shadow was at a certain time of day. So I don't write on. Sometimes I use a pin, and if I do use a pin, I guess I stick it right in the point of the shadow. And whatever object you have that's casting a shadow, you want to make sure it's a nice sharp point. Like you don't want it to be blunt, and you don't want it to taper down to an edge of something that might, as you're tracking during the day, it might end up not being the actual point of your nail. I've seen that some people had a nail that was actually quite a thick nail, and during midday you couldn't see the tip, the shadow cast from the tip of the nail anymore. It was like bouncing off the body of the shank of that nail. So you'll just want to make sure you have a good look at your at the shadow shape and make sure it's actually a tip and it doesn't become like this blunt curve. But yeah, try and collect as sharply as possible. In my opinion, the optimum setup for a sundial would be a bay windowsill of your house that faces towards the equator. And this gives you an environment that is much easier to control against natural elements such as rain, wind, snow, etc. Whatever object you choose for your sundial, make sure it is sturdy and does not move during the day as you're collecting your data. Watch out for kids bumping your setup. Watch out for cats rubbing up against your nail. They could wobble it out of place. And watch out for people like leaning on your recording surface, which could cause the setup to move, deflect, sink in the ground, or depress in the grass, etc. Like, so I've seen some people set up a table out in their yard and the table legs are going down into the ground. And if you put your weight on the table, then the whole thing sinks into the dirt. And that's not good. It can't move. So be thinking about things like that. And then here's some tips. If you are going to use the taller sundial, like a fence post, I truly believe that this might be the best or easiest overall method if you have a large enough yard or a parking lot. Just make sure your yard or parking lot is flat. Again, it does not need to be perfectly level. It could be a sloping parking lot, but the surface of that parking lot would have to have a flat plane following that slope. So I have found that children's play chalk works well on paved parking lots or roads for marking with taller sundials, and perhaps spray paint on the ground if it's a dirt parking lot or road. And if you're out in the yard, I have found that little colored construction flags, they work excellent. So another big important point is the location of your sundial. You will want to pick a spot where you're able to collect a minimum of 9 to 10 hours of data in a single day. And the more hours of data you can collect, the better. It will make it easier for you to be able to discern the straight line. For comparison, if you are wondering how many hours are possible in an optimum location, I have seen people be able to collect 12 hours of data in a single day, something like 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And if you can't get that much, just get as much as you can. You might be able to confirm your results with other truth seekers in your area. And I just want to caution, if you picked out a spot for your sundial in the middle of the summer or winter, you will want to be careful to double check your setup 1 to 2 weeks in advance of the Equinox event to make sure you are still getting 9 to 10 hours of data in a day. During different times of year, locations of shadows from trees or houses can shift around. So you'll want to make sure that something didn't change and you end up having shadows from trees and houses cutting off your early morning or late evening data points if you did pick a location in the summer or winter. At a minimum, you need to try to collect 3 data points, one as early in the morning as possible, one as late in the evening as possible, and then one more around midday or solar noon. Something within 30-minute time frame of solar noon is recommended. It does not need to be exactly at solar noon, as you will find the shadow pattern progresses rather slowly at midday. So there's a little bit of wiggle room there at solar noon. The more points you can get, the better, just in case the sky is cloudy in the early morning or late evening. So it really, the more points you can get, the better. Like as you're approaching evening, for example, and you had good data points all the way through, and maybe you were telling yourself, oh, I'm just going to wait for that nice late evening point, but then it got cloudy at the end of the day, then you have nothing to compare with. Whereas if you were collecting a few points leading into that evening, and then it got cloudy, at least you would have something to compare to. So the more points you can collect, the better, especially towards the end of the day. Just caution, be alert for those early morning and late evening data points, as the shadow moves very quickly during these times of day. So if you're not paying attention for a few minutes, you could miss it. The shadow could just run right off your recording surface really fast. If the forecast is calling for clouds and rain, do not give up. I have seen so many occasions and have heard many testimonies of the Creator moving clouds out of the way just for a few seconds, but enough time to get the critical sundial marks. And remember, you only need a minimum of 3 points over the course of an entire day to make the confirmation, and you only need a few seconds to get that mark. So a little break in the clouds, it can definitely happen. I've definitely seen it happen and heard of it happening. So once your data for the day has been collected, you will want to get in the habit of pulling a fine string or use a straight edge to create a straight line connecting your first data point of the day to your last data point of the day. And then the test will be to see where is that midday point with respect to the straight line. If at all possible, I highly recommend that you try to collect 3 days of back-to-back data to confirm you measured all 3 track patterns. Unfortunately, it is very common for people to think they are seeing the straight line on multiple days, or if they just collected data one day, they're like, oh, I saw the straight line. But the thing is, like as I mentioned earlier, sometimes if you don't get a good spread of data, like at least 9 hours of data, if you got something like 8 or 7, there could be many days where it looks like it's straight, even if someone only was able to collect 1 day of data. And they're like, oh, it was straight. But really, you need those 3 days of back-to-back sundial data to confirm that that midday point was on one side of the straight line for the first day, and then it was on the straight line for the second day, and then it was on the other side of the straight line on the third day. And that'll correspond with those 3 different curves or shadow some track patterns that you saw up in the heavens. Okay, and then please be sure to try and snap a picture of your entire data set with a camera having good picture quality and high resolution if you plan on sharing the data with anyone else. Like if you snap the picture, maybe open it and actually like zoom in and make sure you can read any notes that you may have written down, and make sure you can see those data points crisply. Like, where was the actual point? You can zoom in and see it. Please also include notes in the picture calling out the date of the data set and also what time of day was the first and last data points collected. That's critical. We as different people are, for your data to be of any value to anyone else looking at it, like we need to understand the date, and we need to understand the time of your first mark and the time of your last mark. And if you're collecting multiple days of data on a single board, please be sure to try not to over congest the data. Try to use things like colors or letters to differentiate data points from one day to the next. For example, the first day of data could get the letter A, and the next day of data could be tagged with the letter B, so on and so forth. And it is not necessary to put a time of time of day timestamp next to every single data point you collect. I would recommend a single time of day timestamp on your first and last data points of the day, and then possibly one more general timestamp around solar noon, or like 1:30 p.m. approximately. And that's it. That should be enough for you, because it does come in handy for you to be able, when you're making that midday mark, to know approximately where that is. So have in your head approximately what time solar noon is, and then actually mark where that was approximately. Again, within a 30-minute window is fine, but that way when you run out midday, you know kind of where the shadow needs to be. And the reason for that is you get the most inflection in your curve at midday. So when you're comparing that midday mark to the straight line, if you only collected like mid-morning or mid-afternoon instead of midday, that would make it closer to the line, or maybe harder to tell if it was on one side or the other of the line. So the max point of inflection is somewhere around solar noon. So that point's important. And the last thing is just practice. This is not complicated stuff, but I do recommend not putting off your practice until the last minute, as it seems people usually run into a few bugs that need to be worked out. I definitely recommend trying to collect at least a full day of data about 1 week ahead of the Equinox event to make sure nothing catches you off guard during the actual event. And then I guess I'm just including an actual sample of some data. The Covenant Calendar Club is they have an ongoing sundial project that they've been getting a lot of their members involved with this summer, and they've just been practicing over the course of the summer, and they're planning to get good practice over this fall Equinox event coming up in a couple weeks, so that they will be ready for the spring Equinox event or the March Equinox event. There's I guess I don't have it here, but there is a Facebook group. I will include a link in the description below this video for all the data associated with that. So all the pictures from all the members, and you can click on that link to go see if you want to look at anyone's pictures. And there is a Facebook group. I'll include the name of that in the description below this video. I forget what it is in the moment. It's like solar tracking confirming the creator's times via Genesis 1:14. Solar tracking observations, maybe. But I post all data, sundial data, live to that Facebook group, and I try to also do videos on my YouTube channel, live updates for the Equinox event. So if you want to stay connected with that, check out those groups. But anyway, so just looking at this data set, this is coming from one of the Covenant Calendar Club leaders from British Columbia, Canada. And she collected earlier in the year, it looks like back in June. In this bottom picture, you can see there was much more of a curve in that picture. And then here lately, this past week in September, she was collecting again, and see how much it's already straightened out at this point. And it looks like she's collecting data from 8 a.m. to roughly 7 p.m. So that's almost as good as you can get. About 11 hours of data. And pretty much the best is like 12. So she should not have any issue seeing the straight line. And let's see, her solar noon is around 1:18. And let's see. Oh yeah, she mentioned she was having some trouble with the clouds, and she made a good observation, which I can definitely confirm. I mean, just to be aware of, if you see big, how do you say those, cumulus clouds. Yeah, I remember that one. But those big guys, they do move around, and you're able to see they do move and the sun will come out. It's really the high wispy clouds that are just when it's like a big high sheet of cloud way high up in the sky. Those are the ones that are kind of a bummer. But don't give up. Don't give up. I have seen the Creator do things like move any kind of cloud if you're diligently seeking and need the confirmation. He'll either help you or help someone else, and we can all work together to make these important confirmations. But yeah, this looks like good practice. One thing I can see in this lower one from the 16th is a whole bunch of different color pins. So I don't know if her plan would be to use a new paper each day and just a new set of pins each day. That would be fine. But if anyone was planning to record multiple days of data on a single board, some people paint their boards white, some people are putting a new piece of, or they got a piece of paper on there from day to day. You'll want to make sure like the pins are all one color for one day, or you're using a letter or something to differentiate if you're showing multiple days of data. You don't need to for an Equinox event. That's kind of neat. You could actually start afresh each day. If you want to put a new piece of paper on there each day, you can. And that might make things a little simpler and less congested. So I guess that's it for now. We've got, it's just about, I think a little less than 2 weeks to go to the next Equinox event. So I hope this video helps, and feel free to leave a comment or check out the description below this video. I'll have that link for the Facebook group. You can stay connected, and if you want to join this effort, please just leave a comment or feel free to email me at avoiceoftruthandlove@gmail.com, and I'll make sure to share your data shared, so other truth seekers around the world we can all help each other out. So shalom, and may Abba bless as you continually seek out his truth in love with a pure heart.